Welcome back to another video about effective long document formatting in a word processor. If you haven't yet seen the previous videos in this series, I do recommend you go back and have a look at them. The first introduced you to some of the controls on the screen that your word processor presents to you, and the second one looked at what is font formatting. So how do we change the appearance of characters on the page, and what are the options available to us, from the most basic things like making a letter bold all the way to quite advanced settings like kerning and spacing, etc. But in this video, I'm going to show you probably the most powerful part of formatting in a word processor that is really fundamental for understanding how to use formatting styles, which we will talk about in a future video. There's quite a lot to paragraph formatting. I'll probably break this up into a couple of episodes because it will be too long otherwise. And in the beginning, we're going to look at the more basic things like alignment, indents, and most importantly, spacing. All right, to show you some of these fancy things about what we can do to paragraphs, I'm going to need a little bit more text than what's on the page right now. And I'm going to go to, I've pulled off a website called a lorem ipsum generator. I've asked it to give me 5 paragraphs of text. Nope, that's not what I asked for. If I go to my lorem ipsum generator and I say, please give me some paragraphs, and then please copy them, and then I can paste them here. There we go. We have 5 long paragraphs of words that don't particularly look anything meaningful. And you can see Word doesn't think it's meaningful either because it's underlining everything as misspelling, but don't worry about that. Okay, what we have here is some text to play with, and as we looked at in the previous video, we need to show our formatting. So I'm going to click on this tilde on the paragraph formatting section of my ribbon to show me exactly what's going on. You can see that the end of each paragraph has that little tilde sign, even when it runs over the page. And you can see that there are different font properties. I've got 2 paragraphs that are in Calibri, which is a sans serif font. From my previous video, we've got a little bit of formatting here, but I'm going to erase it. And my lorem ipsum is in a serifed font. It is in Times New Roman. I guess Latin always wants to look fancy, so it's going to use fancy frilly letters. But I'm going to say no thank you. Control A to select everything in my document. Can you make that all Calibri, please? And can you also please make it the same size? All right, so I've changed the font properties here because I just want something a little bit more consistent. Okay, what is going on with paragraph? Let's explore the different options that are presented on our section, and then we will look at our paragraph dialogue and see that there is even more under the hood if we want to play. A paragraph has different properties. It is aligned, and we have 4 alignment settings: left aligned, centered, which can be useful for typing up some poetry or for things like titles and headings; right aligned, which we rarely use, but in academic writing, sometimes this becomes useful for what we call block quotes, where you want to have a long extract of someone else's words, and then underneath you would say, that was written by Black in 2023. This is where right alignment would be useful because you want that reference on the right-hand side, so you would use right alignment. Or finally, the 4th form of alignment, which is my favorite, is called justified. And what justified alignment does is it keeps a clean margin on both the right and the left-hand side of the page. Personally, visually, I find this jagged edge on the right-hand side difficult to read. I find alignment much easier to read. And you'll see that that's how, for example, books are typeset as well. If you buy an in-print book, you will very, very rarely find paragraphs that are left aligned. Most of them are justified alignment. It is easier on the eye. It really, really is. This edge makes it difficult to pick up the edge of that line and go to the next one in a way that justified alignment is not. So again, this is a matter of preference. Most of my students tend to left align things. One of the first things I do as soon as I start reading their text is I justify align it because it makes it easier for me to read. Okay. One of the other things that you can see here is you can adjust how much the lines are set apart. So on this one, let's go for what is called 1 point. You can see it's a little bit closer. On this paragraph, 1.15, 1.5, 2. Now, academic texts in particular, again, because it's a very long document, only 1.0 alignment is considered too close. It's considered too crowded on the screen. It's too dense. For ease of reading, at minimum 1.15, preferably 1.5. And it just makes it so much easier to read. So that's another paragraph property. Later, you'll see, obviously, we don't want to go to every single paragraph and go, okay, 1.5. I mean, what a schlep. Can you imagine doing that across a 100-page document? No, 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 no. We do not want that. Later, we will learn how to do styles to be able to change everything, everywhere, all at once, which is wonderful. But before we can start to master styles, we need to know all these different formatting properties. So back to the paragraphs. You can have the line spacing, and you can have space before or after paragraph. Now, you might recall I said earlier that some people, when they want to add space between paragraphs, they do this. Not great. Okay. What you really want, can you see that there's no tilde between my paragraphs? Let me show you what it looks like if you set the default to 0. That is what your paragraphs look like. In fact, if you have a very tight ending on the paragraph where it runs to the end of the page margin, you can't even see that there is a new paragraph. And I would click enter, and my next line of text will be extremely close to the previous paragraph, making this very difficult for my poor reader who is probably old and not a little bit grumpy because they've already read hundreds of pages of badly formatted text today. Not great, really not great. So what people end up with this position is they start to do this. Also, not great, because if at any point you decide, I need that to be a little bit smaller, or I need it to be a little bit bigger, you then have to go through your whole document going, actually, you know you've done this before. You know who you are. What a pain. We don't want to do that. So we're going to set up our paragraph properties to put the right amount of space in between our paragraphs. We're going to grab our paragraphs in this case because we haven't defined a style yet to do it automatically. And we're going to go, the normal increments are 6 point. I don't know why it jumps up in 6 points, but it does. And you can go, okay, you can change the amount of space before and after. When we look at headings, you'll see that actually for headings, you want a little bit more space before than for a normal paragraph, just to kind of set it apart as a new section. But for now, paragraphs are going to go, thank you very much. Give me 6 points in between. Now, isn't that quite elegant and neat and tidy? But if I want a little bit more, I don't have to go and add a million. So you can remove it here, but you can't actually change it. I'm going to go back to my dialogue. I'm going to go, actually, I'm going to manually choose a non-standard increment. I'm going to make it 8. And it's just a little bit more. So unbelievably refined level of control about how much space falls between the paragraphs. Another part of paragraph formatting, there you can see we've got that alignment again. We're going to talk about levels when we start talking about numbering and bullet points and nested numbering in a different video, because those are special types of paragraphs, so don't worry about that for now. But another useful thing is indentation. So this sets how much, you can see it's doing a preview here for me, how much is this going to be indented from each side of the margin that is set on my default page. And I'll go, okay, left and indent and right indent is very, very nice. And there are special indents, which is the first line or the hanging, which says make the first line of the paragraph in a bit, but everything else is normal. And hanging is everything but the first line. Let's go with the left and right first. This is really useful when you're doing academic text, because this is what you do with a block quote. Maybe you'd add some font formatting and go, well, you know, this famous historian said these things. There is their quote. And I want to show that this is a block quote from someone else's work. So I indent it on both sides. Some people italicize, some people don't. And then I'm going to go reference point, a famous historian. Oh, not historian. I don't know. Long time ago. There is your reference for your block quote. Can you see how I've used the same paragraph properties indented, the same font formatting properties italicized, but in my new paragraph, I have made it right aligned. That's quite useful. We don't really tend to use hanging and first line indentation a lot in academic texts, but book typesetters do. You'll see often with a novel, they don't have a lot of space in between the paragraphs. They indent the first line of the paragraph to lead the eye to realize this is a new paragraph starting. Why 1.27 centimeters? Well, again, this is where you get little sort of vestiges and hang-ups from older stuff. Of course, that is half an inch. And a lot of the software was originally written in the US, which uses a mix of metric and imperial measurements. And so the standard default tabs and indents are in fractions of inches. But if you come from a metric country like I do, 1.27 centimeters seems rather arbitrary. Well, it's because it comes originally from inches. If I do that, you'll see, there we go. And it's signaled on my ruler. This is why I like my ruler visible, by this little white triangle, downward pointing triangle, that indicates my first line indent. The little upward pointing triangle indicates my hanging indent. So if I was to grab a different paragraph, oopsie, no, I didn't ask you to do that. If I go here and I go, okay, 1 centimeter first line indent, that's not what I want a hanging indent. Can you see every other line but my first line is is now indented? And then of course, if I drag them both together, I get a full left indent. And over here, I get a full right indent. So you can also set indentation of all these types on the ruler. But we want to be able to do them in the paragraph dialog, because when we set styles later to have a particular look and feel, this is where we will do it. We will not do it on the ruler. So as always in most software, there are redundant plural options for the same features. You'll find that software frequently, can you see that that's actually overshot a little bit? If I go here and I go, oh, show me what's going on. Ah, no, I don't want that. Thank you. So, I mean, it's very nice to be precise with the numbers, because how you drag can be a little imprecise at times. But there are multiple ways of changing the same setting. You can do it from the ribbon, if it is available. If not, you can do it from the dialog. And occasionally there are other, what we call widgets, draggers and sliders and buttons and radio buttons. These are all called widgets. There are widgets on your screen to do these in shorthand. This is an example of a widget. This is my little Zoom widget. but this is not the only way to zoom. I can also set that in other places. Okay, so finally, let's have a quick look at the other things that we can see on our dialogue. We're not going to do these all now. In the next video, I'm going to show you numbering and bullets. And in the video after that, I'm going to show you tabs, which are incredibly powerful, if a little bit tricky to get your head around the first time. But we have a few other options here on this paragraph formatting section. We have creating a bulleted list, which is a type of paragraph styling or formatting. Involves putting a special symbol, which we call a bullet, at the beginning of the paragraph and indenting everything else. We have numbers, which can include different formats of numbers. And we also have forms of lists, multi-level lists. So these are very useful when you're starting to set up headings and subheadings. Here are indent buttons, a different way we can do them. So we could do them on the widget on the ruler. We can do them with these buttons. We did it from the paragraph dialogue as well. Our all-powerful show me the formatting button with the tilde. We've already covered our different forms of alignment and our line spacing. And then here we have a couple of things which very, very rarely used in academic text, but I will show you just because, for thoroughness sake. So we had the option to highlight individual characters on the font formatting dialog. For example, if I want to highlight the word dummy text in green. But that's at the level of characters. What if I want to highlight a whole paragraph? Well, you have this option to shade a paragraph, which can sometimes be useful if you're doing something that's a little bit more like a magazine type setting, something that's a little bit more for glossy print that is visually more appealing than an academic text. And that basically draws a boundary around the paragraph and fills that boundary with a background color. Now, obviously, you need to be careful with this because you can really affect the readability of your text badly if you misuse this and go overboard. But hopefully you can see from this demonstration that the paragraph formatting sits underneath and the font formatting sits on top. So font formatting trumps paragraph. Think of it like a layer cake. If paragraph formatting is the actual sponge that sits underneath, font formatting is the icing on the top. And when you erase font formatting, let me try and do that. Whoopsie. What have I done there? I have erased all formatting. Oh, that's quite unusual. That includes paragraph formatting too. Look at that. But if I want to take this off, it's going to struggle because it doesn't know if it wants me to. That's interesting. If I select this, it doesn't know if I want it to remove the font formatting or the paragraph formatting, so it's doing neither. But if I select the paragraph and I click erase formatting, it is stripping everything off my paragraph. And you see we've gone back to level 1 spacing, we've gone back to left aligned, we have gone back to no paragraph shading, and that is not what we want. But if I select this, and this highlighting thing is a really sticky feature. I don't want it. Thank you very much. I'm going to go back here. Terrible. Why would I want that? No, thank you. Undo. Another feature on here is a border. Now, on occasion, I have found this to be useful, particularly in paragraphs in your headers and footers. When we'll do headers and footers later, you might find that a bottom border or a top on your header or a top border on your footer, it just creates a nice visual boundary between the main body of text on your document and the meta text in your header or footer. But you might find it useful to set aside a paragraph as a different kind of text. Perhaps it is a policy quote, or perhaps it is a vignette of some kind, but not common in academic writing. This is normally, if you want to do an extract from another document, you would do something like this, sort of a block quote. However, borders can be useful, and we'll see with headers and footers later that you can use them to frame the main body text of your document very, very nicely. This button here is a sort button, not unlike what you have in Excel. Really, I can't recommend using this in a word processor. I found it to be quite buggy. But one of the places you might use this is with your references. So if you've added references in order of using them, this can be a useful sort by paragraph, sort by headings, and you can use it in some ways. I never use this at all. I found it to be more trouble than it's worth. Okay, so that is the basics of the paragraph section. As I said, in the next video, we are going to be looking at things like numbering and bullets. We will do a separate video on tabs, which is a sub-dialogue over here. And this is very powerful, very cool, but I don't see it used very often. And then a last little bit that was on this dialogue is line and page breaks. Again, not common to use this, but we will start to look at page breaks and widow and orphan control when we start to look at page formatting, which is underneath the layout tab over here. This is where you can start to see different kinds of breaks, including page breaks and section breaks. So that will be when we do a different video on sections, how to use them, what they can and what they cannot do for you. For now, we're going to call that a wrap on basic paragraph formatting. I will see you in the next video.